Hello and welcome to JRock's Babylon. How y'all doing on this beautiful Sunday, Mother's Day? It is May 10th. Can you believe it? Yes. Okay. Well, I thought, again, being that today is Mother's Day, that we do a special Mother's Day episode, dedicated to all the special mothers out there. And so I thought we'd make this a little fun since I'm a real big fan of pop culture type of stuff. I thought, well, first of all, later today, me and my dad will be taking my mom out for Mother's Day. She wants to go out and get Chinese food. That's what we're going to do. And um, she picked to do that. Now, Mother's Day, when I was growing up, practically every year it was a real big event, But then again, one thing that has changed the older I get is some of the loving mothers that used to be a part of my life are sadly passed on. So some of the folks are no longer here, but we still remember those special mothers on this special Mother's Day. And of course, I'm mentioning some of the great mothers from my past, my both my grandmothers, uh, my Aunt Beverly, who since passed. These are special women in my life that are no longer here. But just because they're no longer here doesn't mean um, we forget about them. Um, but Mother's Day, like I said, was a very special holiday. It seemed like when I was growing up, the mothers were more celebrated than the fathers. But from talking to people in my everyday life, that seems to be kind of a common thing that the mothers get more honored than the fathers. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. That's just kind of the way things go in life. Now, my own mom, like I said, is very much still alive. 80 years old, and no sign of her slowing down. And so, we love that about her. She's still alive and kicking, and we're going to celebrate that as long as she is here. And so that's what my Mother's Day is all about today. My mom is one of the most important people in my life, but I'm sure there are others. If you out there feel the same ways as I do about your own mom. But I thought what would be fun today is to talk about some of our favorite classic TV moms. Okay, and I made a list here just to kind of get started here. Okay, so going all the way back to the 1960s, I thought, okay, let's look at some of the great TV moms that we had in the 1960s. Now, two came to mind. Okay, on the same show. I'm of course talking about Bewitched and Samantha Stevens. Now, could you imagine? Um, could you imagine if you had a mother like Samantha Stevens, a cute little mother? She looked cute and she was a witch, but a beautiful witch. Not like we think of as witches. And I think that was one of the things they accomplished with the sitcom of Bewitched. Most people think of a witch. It's like the evil witch that you see in The Wizard of Oz or something like that. But Samantha was the first thing from that. And then she got in all kinds of mischief, of course, because she was married to a mortal, Darren Stevens, or Samantha's mother and Dora like to call him Dorwood. Okay. Now, so Samantha is one type of mother. She's kind of always trying to do the right thing. And she's balancing her being a witch with being married to a mortal and his expectations, and sometimes the two don't go together. And then there's Endora, which is a standard kind of typical nosy mother-in-law who's always sticking her nose in her kid's business and causing trouble between you know Samantha and Darren, aka Dorwood. Um, And could you imagine if you were Darren and you had a mother-in-law like that who was always putting evil spells on you? Oh man, think what that poor guy must have gone through. But I tell you, I loved Endora, not just as Samantha's mother, but she was a real wicked, strong kind of independent witch slash mother, whatever you want to refer to her. But Endora was a very strong character. Okay, so now I thought, okay, those were just two of the classic TV moms that came to mind. Now there's a whole list of other ones. Now, okay, Carol Brady also from the Brady Bunch. Okay, and Carol was a different type of mother because when the Brady Bunch came on the scene, we knew Mike Brady was a widower, although that was never, except for the first episode, that was really never mentioned. Um, and then never really got too much into it. But Carol had been married once before too, but apparently she was supposed to have been divorced, but that was never really touched upon too much. However, what the Brady Bunch came to represent was one of the first show, probably the first show in TV history where we actually saw a blended family. I'd heard show creator Sherwood Schwartz say in an interview a few years before he died that he created the Brady Bunch after reading an article in the LA Times about, at that time, I guess, like in the 1960s, more and more people were starting to get divorced. It started to become a thing. And so the Brady Bunch, what it represented is, without talking too much about why Carol Brady got divorced or going too much into the history of the characters or about Mike Brady being a widower, um, they just showed how, okay, families were getting more and more divorced, but they showed how this family came together. A guy that had three boys and a woman that had three girls, perfect blended family. And of course, the Brady Bunch also represented all the things that would happen along the way when you try to blend a family. Of kids that were already, in their teenage years, and they had two adolescents, of course, Bobby and Cindy being the two youngest kids. So they were a little bit younger than the other teenage kids. But, bring this up because Brady Bunch was a 30-minute sitcom. And so by the end of each episode, you get kind of some story. We're supposed to learn a moral from, supposed to learn a lesson, and you go away with having a few laughs. Well, also, um, this this didn't. There was one episode I remember in the Brady Bunch where Bobby talks about, Bobby and Cindy watch Cinderella on TV, and he's just horrified by the evil stepmother in Cinderella and starts thinking about Carol, his stepmother, who he starts fearing that she might turn into Cinderella's stepmother. And of course, it's just a silly little thing that a kid had after watching something on TV. But the thing that also makes Carol Brady such a strong mother, one of our most favorite TV mothers, is unlike a lot of people you see in modern day that do go through divorces and they blend their families, get remarried and stuff. Um, Carol Brady was a mother to all six of those kids, especially the boys who lost their mother, and they hadn't had a mother in a long time. And like the first couple episodes, they referred to her as Carol, but by by the third or so episode, uh, the boys referred to her as mom, and Carol was actually a mother to all six kids, if you know what I mean. And in the Brady Bunch, you never see too much where um, Mike or Carol referred to to like the boys as his kids or the girls as her kids. They were just the parents to all six kids, and that was another interesting way Sherwood Schwartz represented this blended family on the Brady Bunch. There was one episode where Mike Brady says something to the effect about in reference to Marcia, who wrote an article about her new dad and how much she loved him, and she won the contest. And Mike Brady says at one point in the episode, you've got a really special daughter, and she says, "My daughter? Don't you mean our daughter?" And so again, the whole thing with the Brady Bunch was trying to make this blended family come together and unite and represent it as one big happy family. That's how it came up with the name the Brady Bunch, because rather than having uh, feuding fractions of people on opposite sides, that the whole idea behind the Brady Bunch was to be one united family. So that's what made Carol Brady such a unique, strong mother. Is she didn't love the girls any more than she loved the boys because the girls were her natural children, she saw them all as her children. And so that's what made Carol Brady such a unique, mother. Now, another one of my favorite moms from the 1970s is Maud Finley, of course, played by B. Arthur. Now, Maud was a loud, outspoken, untraditional mother. She was a bleeding heart liberal. We first come to discover Maud. She's first comes to life on an episode of All in the Family as Edith Bunker's cousin, who's coming to stay with Edith and Archie while Edith is sick, and she helps around the house. And I would just say that while Archie Bunker was a real hard conservative, and Maud was the complete opposite, being a loudmouth, bleeding heart liberal. Archie and Maud didn't really see too much eye to eye on, and they were both loud and opinionated. They had that in common, but that's why they never really got along. And then Maud being so loud and outspoken is nothing like sweet Edith, who is very kind and soft spoken, and so that's the other. Okay, so that's the next one we're going to get to on our list. Edith Bunker. Now let's talk about Edith Bunker and what made her such a standout mom. She is one of TV's most beloved favorite mothers figures. Edith became so beloved by TV audiences because her kindness was combined with emotional strength, humor, and humanity. She had this emotional strength in a way that felt so real to TV audiences. Edith wasn't she wasn't glamorous, but or perfect. She was vulnerable. She was awkward, but yet she deeply cared about other people. That was probably her greatest strength, and she also was often very underestimated. She always showed wisdom and compassion. And so Edith Bunker is one of these characters that comes across as maybe very soft spoken, maybe you think she's easily taken advantage. She's a woman that's much wiser than most people give her credit for. Probably Edith had a hard life. Her and Archie Bunker are complete opposites, but they love each other. And Edith and Archie so balance one another. I think Edith brought out much of Archie's good in him, that other people maybe weren't able to see because she loved him so much, and she supported so much of what Archie did, and that's why I remember when the character of Edith Bunker was killed off. That was really right there, the end of All in the Family, and then they turned it into Archie Bunker's place for a few years. But again, when Edith Bunker was killed off, he apparently had suffered from a stroke, and so it was kind of sad. That was one of the saddest episodes I ever seen on TV. Thinking, oh wow, Edith was, man, she was one of the mothers I loved most from TV, and wow, when Edith died, it was like somebody in my family had died. I'd even heard Gene Stapleton years later in an interview talk about how broken-hearted the show's creator Norman Lear was when she announced she was leaving the show, and the decision was made to kill off Edith Bunker. He felt like if he had based so much of Edith Bunker on his own mother, he felt like he was losing his own mother or something like that. Even though Edith Bunker was a fictional character, Norman Lear felt very close to Edith Bunker because she was one of the characters that he had a big role in creating, off of that show. So again, fictional characters, but yet they touch our lives. So that was one that I never really got over, the death of Edith Bunker. And then, of course, the years following Edith's death, in Archie Bunker's place, from time to time, Archie would talk about losing Edith, and it showed his vulnerable side, and it showed that he loved her very much, and he very much did realize what he had in her, what he'd lost, and how very different his life was. Now, we're just touching the surface now. Probably one of my all-time favorite TV moms next to Edith Bunker has got to be the lovable Mrs. C, Mrs. Cunningham on Happy Days, of course, played by Marion Ross. Marion Ross is still very much alive and well. She's celebrating, I think she's like 96 or 97 at this point as we sit here and do this today. So Mrs. C, I'm glad you're still with us. But Mrs. C, she was strong, she was dependable, she was loving towards everybody, and Mrs. C rarely said a foul word, but that's how you kind of knew when she was mad. One of the things she would say from time to time, she got really mad, and this would be the kind of test that she was mad. Oh, sit on it, Howard. And come to find out, sit on it back in the 1970s was basically another way to say F you to somebody, but without saying it. So you had to kind of read between the lines. And Mrs. C, anytime she would say this, she'd say it in a way like where she'd raise her voice just a little to let everybody know that she's a little ticked off. So when you hear Mrs. C say, sit on it, you better watch out. I used to love the way Mrs. C and Mr. C would be frisky with. That's the thing they'd say instead of saying, "Hey, let's go upstairs and go to bed," or let's make love or do something like that. There were certain standards back then that certain things you couldn't say on TV. So that was another way they got around. Whenever you'd hear Mr. and Mrs. C say, "Let's get frisky," that was their way of saying, "Let's go and have some fun in the bedroom." And whenever the kids or anybody would hear mom and dad say, "Let's go get frisky," they knew what they were talking about. Okay, and so that was another fun aspect of the show. And Mrs. C was just anybody that watched Happy Days. All those kids came over to a Cunningham family because they knew how lucky Richie and Joni were to have Mrs. C as their mom. In fact, I kind of think that Ralph and Posse were always over there because they liked hanging out with Mr. and Mrs. C too, and they wished that Mrs. C was their mom too. And then even the Fonz, who was a big breakout character on Happy Days, Mrs. C was the closest thing to a mother that he'd had in years. The Cunningham family taking him in, they let him move in above their garage in the apartment up there. Mrs. C would always make food for the Fonz and invite him down to dinner. And so he became a member of the family. And so Mrs. C was kind of everybody. And even though, they had Richie and Joni and even Chuck Cunningham, we can't forget about him. I know so often people forget about Chuck Cunningham, but so Mrs. C was she was basically a mom to everybody. And I think that's why, if you ask me, I got so many of these favorite TV moms that Mrs. C's got to be my most favorite, and I say Edith Bunker's maybe at number two. Okay, so also there's Florida Evans. Now, Florida Evans, of course, was the mother on Good Times. She was the mother to JJ Kid Dynamite, Thelma, and Michael Evans, of course, married to James Evans. Now, anybody doesn't know that Good Times was a spinoff of Maude, another Norman Lear creation, of course. Florida Evans was originally Maude's maid, and her husband was James. And then Good Times, when they had their own series, that shows us their life in the Chicago projects. And by the third season, the character of James Evans is killed off in a car accident, just as things are supposed to be moving on up for the Evans clan. But Dad gets killed in a car accident, and then the big move out of the ghetto gets stalled, and they have to end up staying in the ghetto. And then Mom Florida, who's always been a strong dignified woman, she has to now overcome the death of her husband, James, has to deal with getting over that and raising her family in the ghetto. And she has to now go out and get a job and help support the family. And and then, so the rest of the show after James Evans is killed becomes much more about the family kind of working together to just kind of get by. And that's why Florida always showed came across as a very strong woman. She had a lot of dignity. She had pride. Now she would leave. Of course, I'm talking about Esther Rolle, who played Florida Evans. She would leave the show like in season 4, um, because after the death of James Evans, um, Norman Lear had created a love interest for Florida. Carl Dixon comes along, and she eventually quickly marries him shortly after James has died. Now, um, Esther Rolle would leave the show because she was very proud too about how she represented the character of Florida Evans, and she did not feel that Florida would have gotten married again. So especially so soon after James had died, um, and so she left for a season or two and came back for the final season of the show. And she told Norman Lear, "Okay, there's never going to be a mention of Carl Dixon again, and I don't want JJ saying dynamite so much. I want to be a more serious show." And that's what it became. And then by the end of the final season, the Evans family finally got out of the ghetto. Velma and Keith announced they're having a baby, and everybody's moving on up to the better part of Chicago, along with their best friend and neighbor, Walona Woods. So these are just a few of my favorite classic TV moms. Now let's move down the list, folks. Excuse me. Another one has got to be Louise Jefferson. Just earlier this year, we did an episode on the fact that 2026 marks the 50th anniversary of the Jeffersons. I'm confused here, folks, because the latest episode of our show, JRock's Pop Culture Revolution, we just did on the 50th anniversary of Laverne and Shirley, but we're supposed to be talking about TV Mother's Day. So very much we're talking about Louise Jefferson now. Louise Jefferson was another beloved TV mother because she brought warmth, intelligence, and patience to her role. She also had dignity, and she was one of the TV's most beloved mothers, and one of the most beloved TV sitcoms. She was a perfect balance for George Jefferson. Louise had compassion for everyone. She was a strong woman without being too harsh. And I think that's what made her really stand out. Now, finally today, folks, before we wrap up our special Mother's Day edition of our show, we can't do a show on mothers without mentioning, of course, Anne Romano from One Day at a Time, played by the late, great Bonnie Franklin. Now, throughout the course of One Day at a Time, Anne Romano would have many men that she was interested in. In fact, when the show started, there was a character of David Kane, who was apparently the lawyer in her divorce case, and she ended up hooking up with him. And for like the first 2 years of the show, he was in and out of her life. He was constantly trying to get with her. She was constantly telling him no. And she had other love interest. And then by the end of the show, she'd end up getting married again. But Anne Romano has to be mentioned in our list of favorite TV mothers for so many reasons. Because while we talked a little bit about the Brady Bunch at the top of today's episode, where that was the first time we saw on TV like a blended family of a man that was a widower and a divorcee come together, and they get married and they bring their families together. One Day at a Time was the first time on TV where you ever seen a divorced mother raising two teenage daughters. It was really, and that's why the show really made some serious noise and really stood out. It was like nothing you've seen at that time in the late 1970s. Anne Romano, again, from One Day at a Time, um, was a devoted mother raising two teenage daughters. She was loving, she was flawed, she was independent, she was loud and temperamental. Um, it was her honesty, though, that really made her connect with the TV audience. And again, Anne Romano, talking about the two daughters she had. Okay, um, she's raising her two daughters, Barbara and Julie. Barbara was a younger daughter that at the beginning of the show kind of looked like a tomboy, played by Valerie Bertinelli, but by season two, probably by season 3 or 4, she started getting a little older and started to really blossom and turned into a beautiful girl. And then Julie is a kind of cute but like bad girl of the family. She was always getting in trouble, always kind of doing the wrong thing. There's a couple episodes where Julie runs away. She's always kind of doing the wrong thing, and her and mom are going. Whereas Barbara's a daughter of like little goody two shoes, and so the two daughters are like complete opposites, and they're always kind of tagging along with one another. But again, Julie's constantly getting in trouble, and Barbara's um, constantly doing whatever her mom tells her. But that is the dynamics of the show. Also, Anne Romano is a very important mother in the history of TV because she represented modern single women and many of the women related to her because Anne had to also struggle with her career, her job, her family life, dating, and parenting teenagers. And so that has been kind of, folks, our look at some of our favorite TV moms. This was an interesting kind of way to celebrate Mother's Day, but I thought, hey, let's do it because even though these are fictional characters, like in talking about Edith Bunker and the fact that Edith Bunker died on TV, still a very sad thing to me. Again, it's the death of a fictional character, but there's only probably a handful of TV shows where you can think that where a beloved TV character was killed off. But I guess like in Edith Bunker's case, unless you're going to say that one day Edith finally got fed up with Archie Bunker and just took off and became a modern woman and went out and got her own place. That's not a story we want to hear. So maybe we'd rather believe that the reason Archie and Edith parted because sadly one of them died, and that's kind of the fact of life. So that's another way. Sometimes I guess real life got represented here, as so many people do kind of experience such a loss like that in their life. Well, this has been real fun doing this. I am Jason JRock Houston. I hope you guys have a great Mother's Day. Go out and celebrate Mother's Day with your mother. She's still around, and if not, even though she's no longer around, light a candle and think back all the good times you did have with your mother, and say, Mom, rest in peace. You're gone, but not forgotten. That's how we see Mother's Day here. But thanks, you guys, tuning in. I'll see you again real soon. Bye for now.